Hello, what a lovely evening today has been. And here we are again hosting another amazing conversation. I am Shola Adesoye, and I am privileged this evening to be here with you, connecting with every single one of you out there. And what a joy it is to have you join us. And I believe that other people are going to be connecting with us in a little bit. You know, we've got a very interesting conversation tonight, and it is one that focuses on the COVID-19 and the challenges of the health worker. And I think it's very, very important that we understand what we are up against as a people, as a community, and especially from a global perspective, because understanding makes all the difference. It enables us to be able to, position ourselves appropriately so that we actually can fight the coronavirus. And we just can't hamper on it long enough. We just must keep sensitizing people, informing and bringing them to know the seriousness of what is facing us at a time like this. And I have two guests that are going to be on the program tonight. And these are people who are seasoned, who understand their field, and they are experts in every sense of the word. My first guest tonight is a woman who has excelled herself in the field of medicine and in the field of science. She is a professor, and actually, she is, I don't know what to say, but she is the executive director of the Institute of the International Research Center of Excellence at the Institute of Human Virology, Nigeria, and she is a professor of virology, University of Maryland, USA. So you know that you're in for someone who's knowledgeable about this field and about this virus significantly, and that with just great pleasure and great joy, bring up. Hello, Prof. Can you hear me? We're having a bit of a. Can you hear me, Prof?
Now I can hear you, Pastor.
We've got to fiddle with all our gadgets constantly so that we can. And so for some, it's a learning curve. It's
Right.
It's a joy and a pleasure having you on this conversation this evening.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's an honor to also share this platform with you, Pastor, and other guests. I know that I have benefited tremendously from listening from the other experts that you've brought to really educate us. Being a member of Lighthouse, I have been so blessed, and I'm happy to be here this evening. And good evening to all of our viewers. It's wonderful to share this evening with you all.
That is awesome. And I know we're going to be having such a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful time with you this evening. I'd want to begin, first of all, and I always like to begin from basics. So the world is under the weight of a pandemic, and it is a virus. Maybe would begin, first of all, and ask you, what's the difference between a virus and a bacteria? I think, these are basic things that sometimes we expect that people should know.
Right.
But can you just educate us tonight?
Thank you, Pastor. Thank you, sir. In very simple terms, they are both microorganisms So there are things that we don't see with our naked eyes, but they do cause a lot of havoc. In nature, there are bacteria that are good for us. So there are bacteria that are normal flora and that coexist and really helps our system. With viruses, it's less so. Viruses are really much smaller than bacteria. Most of them are RNA viruses. They are RNA in terms of their genomic content, and most of them cause infection. One of the ways that viruses reproduce themselves to a large extent is by using the host cell and all the machineries of this host cell to reproduce itself. Bacteria, on the other hand, you could have bacteria on a piece of bread or milk or whatever, and just they have the proteins around them and they can really reproduce themselves. In science, we've had a lot more success in getting drugs against bacteria. So you have a little infection in the throat. It may be streptococcus or staphylococcus. They give you antibiotics. You take it for 7 days, you feel better. For most viruses, there are no effective drugs among them. HIV is an outlier, and because of the havoc that HIV caused, they were able to get drugs that crippled it, but it never. That's why we don't have a cure. It never quite get rid of it. So viruses are microorganisms that our body fights using our natural fighting mechanisms, our own immune systems to fight it. So the fitter you are, the more likely you are to get an infection by a virus and clear it. If you're weak, then your body is unable to really fight it. And because we don't have drugs that actually eliminate these viruses, then you're not able to take antibiotics or anything to really get rid of it. And that's why vaccination, especially against viruses, is absolutely critical, because that's one of your fighting mechanisms against viruses. Can't hear you.
Thank you for illuminating us. You mentioned something very valuable and valid, and that speaks about the immunity. And you did say that. So, I mean, the way I put it is that the body itself has a fighting mechanism that is inbuilt. Mm-hmm. That when a virus infects the body, it naturally works towards destroying the virus. Mm-hmm. And that is also hinged upon the condition of the state of health of the individual. So if you're a healthy person, your body will do a good job at, waging, a successful war. And if you're not, however, if you're not healthy, then you're prone to a real attack and a major fight. Now, when we look at Africa, for example, and we use maybe health indices, so let's even look at Nigeria. I mean, we clearly do have a health challenge in terms of the fitness of people. People are not feeding well. And that, therefore, it's a major fight, because majority of people are just not healthy.
Absolutely true. I remember that there was a time that, obviously the continent has been bombarded by several infections and pandemics and outbreaks. And I remembered one of my professors actually saying, if we can solve the issue of poverty, we would have solved 70% of Africa's problem. And you're absolutely right about that. I mean, the Bible talks about our body being the temple of God and to really care for it. And And I think there's so much wisdom in that, because with the viruses, with COVID-19, what will fight the viruses for you is your body, is your ability to eat well, is your ability to sleep well, is your ability to exercise well. And you're absolutely right that one of our collective responsibility is that at a time like this, we reach out to those who are unable to feed. And I love the fact that actually at the Sunday service, you sir, addressed how it is hash, I am my brother's keeper, right? That we reach out to people that don't have enough. Because really, what would fight this virus is your own inbuilt mechanism that God has given you that sounds the alarm. There is something strange in your body, and we must get rid of it. And so your body starts producing those cytokines, the neutralizing antibodies, and all of that response that actually helps you to deal with it. But you're right. If somebody is hungry, if they're poor, their immune status is very low and they're very vulnerable. So at a time like this, helping our neighbors to have a decent meal is really collectively fighting coronavirus.
Thank you so much for that insight. It just shows that even as individuals, there's something we can do. There's no vaccine yet, but yet just by feeding people and making sure that, well, I mean, I think we generally are forced to rest now with lockdown, but, just, getting them something to eat helps to put them in a better position to fight the virus. Thank you for that. But it's also important. I mean, what makes the coronavirus, especially COVID-19, different? When we understand that influenza and people, the flu has become so commonplace that when you say I've got the flu, it's just okay. Yeah, I'm sneezing, and probably having some chills. But what makes this different? I mean, if you can help us out, that'd be good.
Yes, sir. That is so important. It's amazing. I mean, man has been on this earth for several years, and yet, man has not seen everything that God has created, or that is in this world. So one thing that is really unique about the coronavirus is the fact that it is novel. So there are other viruses of its own family, like the SARS and the MERS, that have actually caused infection in the Middle East that jumped from, we believe that the camel was the source of it. It jumped from its natural host. When it is in its natural host, the camel, it really doesn't cause it any harm. But the moment it jumps into an unusual host, man, it caused the Middle East acute respiratory acute syndrome that we know of. And then the SARS are also similar. But COVID-19, based on its genomic makeup, is really very different. It's something that the whole global population is a naive population. So your body, nobody within the world has actually seen that, because as we grow, what helps us, that's why when you're an infant, it's important that you have the pediatric vaccination, because what that gives you is a head start on anything you're going to come across. But our body is made in such a way that once we come across something, the alarm rings, the body responds to it. The next time we see that, the body has the alarm system is much louder. And the body is saying, oh, I've seen this before, so I don't have to have any building mechanism. I don't have to build a house to kind of get rid of it. There is a house already that, or there are punches already that are there that I can take and use. You see, when our bodies, the way God made us, gets a signal that something strange is in the body and you need to get rid of it. There are three different kinds of immune responses that happen. One is the alarm, is the adrenaline. Something is in there, get it out. And the fitter you are, the faster you will get that thing out. So that during this early stage of infection, when you're fighting, the virus is getting there, your immune system is getting, the virus is getting there. Your immune system, because it's so fit, that immediate response hit it before it even starts multiplying, because it does need our cells to multiply, right? So there is that immediate innate, they call it innate immunity. And that's your first defense. And most times, if you're not fit, that defense is not strong. So what you depend on is your subsequent response that is specific for that pathogen. Now, if you're seeing that pathogen for the first time, your body takes a long time, several days to really build an immune response to it. And so at the time your body really builds that immune response, that thing has gained because it has replicated. It hasn't had anything hit it. So coronavirus is a bit like that. Our body has never seen it. So our responses take a long time. Now, what happens with the flu is our body have seen it before. It doesn't take 7 days to make a response. It takes 1 day to make a response. So that battle happens on day 1 rather than day 7 when the pathogen is. So the whole world over, nobody has seen it except now. So all of us are kind of falling ill as a result of not really being able to fight it. That's why when there are conversations about people who have recovered, how vulnerable are they? Well, you cannot, science, we still have to look at the science. You cannot exclude the fact that they could be infected a second time. But what we know for sure in science is the second time, your body is better prepared because it's seen it before.
That's good to know. Because people keep saying, and all over the news media, the idea that one could get a second infection, and that just breeds more fear. So it's good knowing that the body has recognized it, and so even if there's a second infection, the body knows and says, I know you, I've dealt with you before, and I know exactly what to push out to fight you.
Awesome. Yes, sir.
That's fantastic. Now let's get to so why is finding a remedy? I don't want to say a cure now because of the unique nature of viruses, a vaccine. Why is it such a challenge? And it's almost looking as if without a vaccine, our world truly can't come back to normal.
No, absolutely, sir. Especially for viruses, because of everything we know about viruses, the most effective weapon against viruses is a vaccine. Because again, what does vaccine do? It just tells your body, gives you parts of that virus so that your body is primed to respond. So what it does is it tricks your body. It takes parts of coronavirus and throws it at your body. So the body says, okay, I know this. So when it sees the real thing, it's able to fight it much. And for viruses, that's why, like the flu shot is always a good idea to take it. When we're kids, we've got the measles, we've got polio, we got BCG. And Mother Africa is actually a little at an advantage because, the affluent people of the West have always questioned that 1 in a million side effect of vaccines. And so the pediatric vaccines that you and I are very familiar with, in the West, they're having problems with that because they've gone through this generation that says, oh, you know what? That 1 in a million side effect that happens to measles, it may happen to my kid. So I want to protect myself against vaccination. So it's been a big problem for them in the West as far as vaccination is concerned. But Having said that, though, all of history, the most effective weapon against viruses has always been vaccines. But they are also very, very difficult to engineer and get, and to engineer one, and even the testing takes several years. So there are always almost about 3 or 4 different steps. The first step is you put a construct in the laboratory, and when you put that construct in the laboratory, you're not putting a full organism. You're putting different bits of the virus to just give your body something to fight against, right? Mm-hmm. And usually in the laboratory, and now with computation, you identify the parts of the virus that it absolutely needs for survival. And that's what goes into your vaccine cocktail, so that your body is already primed towards that. The first test is when that is put together in the laboratory, you have to do a safety test. And you use animals, and then after a while, you use a small number of individuals, make sure they're fine. And then you go to phase 2, you test whether, okay, is it even stimulating the right immune response, and then when you find out that, oh yeah, we can test, there's this kind of response is at this high level, and it's really getting rid of the virus. Then you do a phase 3 where you go out in the population. So whether it's raining, whether they're underfed, whether all of the factors that affect a human being as they mount up the immune response, you are able to test it in a larger population, usually from different geographical areas. And it's only after that, when you do a double-blinded clinical trial, and you are able to show that somebody that received something that is a sham, but doesn't have the vaccine, compared to somebody that has the vaccine, is doing worse. So you know that the vaccine works. And that's when it becomes licensed, and then it goes under the film. So I like to share something to you that people have tend to forget. But remember that the work on HIV vaccine started 30 years ago. We still do not have an effective vaccine against HIV.
It started 30 years ago.
Yes, sir. It started 30 years ago, and we've got people, scientists, including my boss, Robert Gallo, who is a co-discoverer of HIV with a Frenchman, that says, no, now we've got the virus. We know its genomic makeup. Getting a vaccine is just a matter of a couple of years. We will get a vaccine in 1984. And 1984 came, where in 2020, we still do not have an effective vaccine against HIV. So vaccines are really tricky. But having said that, though, honestly, the technology has changed a lot. We are lucky that we have SARS and MERS, which are from the coronavirus family that look alike. So the industries have had a little bit of a head start, that now at this time, 2 or 3 months after the discovery of coronavirus, we actually have candidate vaccines that are going into people. That is totally unheard of. So I am praying that by next year, we really would have a vaccine. At least now we're testing candidate vaccines. So until they show that they're effective, they're really candidate vaccines. And then when they're effective, they can be licensed.
So you kind of have a timeline. And you said by next year. I thought you would say by July.
Ooh. No, I think the clinical trials, I think even if you have a product, the fact that you have to go through those different phases, and by the time you get to the point where you want to license it, it's really several thousands and thousands of people. And that's where the global collaboration really is very helpful.
So people right now should do 2 things. Number 1, build and strengthen their faith in God and in His Word, and also eat well so that they can be healthy, just in case, the immunity needs to fight, the virus.
Very true, sir. Of course, we can't forget washing our hands, using the mask, and having social distancing. I know it's very strange in Africa to see somebody and you don't hug that person, but but I think it's something that we have to do until we deal with this pandemic.
Yeah, and you know, every time we read Third John 2, we kind of tend to miss out on the significance of it. Beloved, I wish above all things that you may be in health. And
Mm,
that is significant. And that speaks about us being healthy, that you may be in health and you will prosper as your soul prospers. So,
purpose.
your understanding of eating the right fruits, a balanced diet, vegetables, you know, and just focusing on foods that have vitamins is one of the ways by which you build your immunity.
Absolutely, without questions. And there are several videos that are circulating. Some of them are not that helpful, but there are quite a few that are very helpful. They are coming from the West. They're coming from individuals that, because they do not have any insurance, they probably will line up for several days before they get any care. They're coming from people that have Caribbean or African roots,
Mm.
and they are going back to everything that dad and mom taught us about the usefulness of some of the herbs and some of the fruits. I knew growing up, dessert was always a mango or an orange or a banana, not chocolate. So there is some wisdom in all of that and in God's creation, because this is something that God has given us freely and to feed off of. So
Yeah,
our Garden of Eden will still take care of us.
awesome. Thank you. And if you are just joining us, we're having an exciting conversation and just looking at the nature of viruses, and with particular focus on the coronavirus. And I have Professor Alashley Abimiku, who is uh, I don't know how to put it. She is an exceptional virologist. Now, let me bring this to you. There are lots of people who are afraid of vaccines because there's been all kinds of information there about, you know, tagging people using vaccines. Bill Gates is behind, he's working for the Antichrist and the beast system. So if you take a vaccine, it's receiving the mark of the beast. And before you know it, your liberties are taken away from you. Entry into countries will now be hinged on that. Now, I mean, being a virologist, and this is your field, you work with viruses. What insight do you have to? Should we be afraid if a vaccine becomes available? Should we, let's even put it this way, should Christians be afraid? Because I think that constituency is really scared.
Yes, sir. I mean, that's such an important aspect. And the underlying comment that I would make is the fact that no, at the stage that we are in today, the responsibility that science places on evidence makes that highly unlikely. Um, Really, most of my days on work and everything that I've done is in a laboratory in the United States. I was involved in putting together the construct for HIV. I was involved in putting them in monkeys and testing the immune responses. I was
Mm.
involved in tests that were done in the US on individuals, on the candidate HIV vaccine. So I do know quite a bit about vaccines that are put together against a virus. One of the things that has happened globally in the last 2 decades is an agreement, a global agreement within the scientific world that says if you are a laboratory, if you are an industry that has put together a candidate vaccine and you have tested it in animals and you think it will work and protect in humans, your responsibility is to do the first safety test in your country of origin. That is, and you do it in small numbers, but you do it in your country of origin before it is taken out to anywhere in the world. Because I've heard a lot of fear about the fact that, this guinea pig story and all of that, and that this is one way that, they want to vaccinate all of the world. So there is that. I mean, those who have the technology to create a chip, to put a little chip in a thing and put it into humans, must test whatever candidate vaccines they have first in their population. And then when it's becoming, if it shows promise, you're allowed to test it in another country. So I think that really guides against a lot of those things that we're talking about. So when you think about, now we see Corona and everybody has forgotten about HIV. HIV was a devastating illness. I mean, people were dying in masses. It was something that was surrounded by stigma and everything. If there was a time that you could actually promote something like that and get it into people, HIV was a perfect candidate, and because HIV targeted Africa. So, they didn't have a lot of it in the West. So if I was going to create that kind of a weapon, HIV was it. But, the responsibility around the scientific world globally, now we have Africans, people from every nation sitting on panels. There is no, in fact, I'm on one of the panels on the WHO that has to discuss candidate vaccines. And so it is very clear. It's a mandate there. It's agreed by all of the world. So I think we really, the Bible does tell us about Antichrist. The Bible does give us a little insight of how Antichrist is going to act. So I think that we really have to hold on to the Word of God, because sometimes we can take this phobia and really just drive ourselves to the point that we have to stop and ask, where is your faith?
That's awesome. I mean, this is such a rich conversation. It's exciting to know also that you worked on HIV. So, I mean, that's encouraging to everyone out there that you're not just speaking out of sentiments or trying to defend the institute you represent. This is, you've had hands-on experience, and therefore for you it's clear to see that what people are taunting out there and pushing out just isn't right. And something else that you've said is, I mean, it's encouraging to know that there's an ethic, so to speak, that governs the creation of vaccines. Mm-hmm. So there are ethics that governs all of the discoveries, and to know that, so if we discover in Nigeria, for example, we must test it first in Nigeria,
yes,
before we take it elsewhere. That leads to my question. So why isn't Nigeria at the forefront of vaccine creation and discovery? Why we don't seem to be there? I mean, I'm sure many people out there probably are shocked that someone like you are working within the Nigerian context, and yet we're not hearing so much about vaccine experimentation, creation, and all of that. So why isn't Nigeria there?
I think the simple answer, sir, is that we're not putting any money into science, innovation, and discovery. If we look at the West, a huge amount of money goes into discovery, what they call R&D, research and diagnostics. There's a significant amount of money that goes into that. In Nigeria, the number of few of us that really want to go into the scientific field spend our days and nights writing grants as competing with the rest of the world just to get that meager amount of money to do something really small. So we really have to have a culture here that recognizes that there is talent, without a doubt, sir. There is talent in our country. There are people that can figure out this, and they've shown in the past that even with the limited stuff that we have, they can really think through. And I believe that God has just given us this wonderful privilege that sometimes and oftentimes He downloads concepts, principles, ideas, imagination that we can run with. And if we had the infrastructure that would support that kind of experimentation, I have no doubt in my mind that Nigeria would be in the forefront. Because you know what? If you look at the international group and you see who are the movers and shakers, and even in the scientific world, they're Nigerians. There are a lot of them that are Nigerians that are putting out that idea and everything. And I keep telling this story about my own life, that when I finished in London, the first thing I wanted to do was come back home with all of these ideas to do research and everything. I was given a job to lecture at the university, and I was promised 40% of my time would be dedicated to research. And I came in, and there was no research facility. There was not a single laboratory for me to go at. And I said, Lord, if you give me one more chance to get out there, I would make sure the next Nigerian scientist has an infrastructure in Nigeria to test their ideas and do that. But I think that is a drop in the ocean. It's a useful drop in the ocean, but we really do need the government, the industries, the philanthropies in our continent to understand the importance of research, of science, of discovery, of innovation, and really build the enabling environment that would allow Nigerians to begin to find our own solutions. I am very encouraged, sir, that even with COVID-19, we've got masks that are done in Nigeria. We've got individuals that are coming together and say, they come, engineers, army from the army, coming together and saying, we can put some ventilators together. So, sir, you can imagine if our government and our industry and our philanthropists could just build that enabling environment and just let all of this talents within Nigeria to roll out, it will be amazing. What we will, but you know, I haven't given up. We're definitely going to have the right president there, the right group of leadership that will make that a possibility. It's a Nigeria I look forward to.
That's awesome. You can't give up. Please don't. This is home. This is base for you, and we just must do everything that we can. I also think that, you know, within our environment, lots of people do not understand what it means to fund research. So let's imagine you throw $20 million, you know, on a research, and nothing comes out of it. You know, the donors naturally feel, especially with the African mindset, that they just wasted the money. So, you know, they feel that it's like if you plant a tree, there must be cocoa. But the $20 million could have taken you probably 7 years ahead. So you've made a 7-year leap.
Absolutely.
That if you had another $10 million, you would, you know, hit it. But we seem to be too wanting quick, you know, results. And just like you've said, 34 years and we still haven't found, you know, a vaccine for HIV.
Absolutely. And sir, if you look at countries like Singapore, you look at countries like China, like India, you know, that should really get Nigeria to think hard. These are people that turn things around, because they say, wait a minute, we're not going to wait on the West. Right now, we're having a problem with having enough COVID-19 test kits for our population. Why? Not because we don't have the money. We've got money there. But the West that control the power are saying, no, we haven't tested enough to pass any to Africa. So India turned this around and said, no, we're going to start doing this, to the point that now India is producing the largest number of generics for HIV treatment. When at the beginning of HIV, they weren't even producing any. So we have to be hopeful. We have to continue to pray that the right leadership will come on and really use up all the gifts that God has blessed this country.
Awesome. We do need to take a couple of questions here. Here's a question coming on the screen. So there is a lot of subtle screams ongoing about a second wave of COVID-19, with addressing historical correlation from 1918, 1919 flu pandemic. Here we are in Nigeria still trying to grapple with the first wave. Should we be concerned about this second wave?
Yeah. And I think, sir, you kind of touch a little bit about that in the sense that we've talked about people that are infected already, and even if they're exposed. So hopefully we have a little bit of a benefit in terms of our body has seen it already. And even if there is a second wave, we can't ignore that fact that is possible. And if you hear leaders like Dr. Tony Fauci, he's actually cautioning America that come autumn and winter, it will be there may be a second wave of COVID-19 along with the flu, which will be really devastating. So there is that possibility, but again, now we know what we need to do. We know the washing of hands, wearing of masks, distancing, and our body has seen it a little bit. We know how to take care of our body. We're not sitting there on cell phones till 2:00 in the morning instead of sleeping and giving ourselves 8 hours sleep. So we know all of this. So we should be better prepared. So I don't think it's a cause for alarm.
That's good to know. Here's another one. Please, Prof, can you comment? Oh, wow, this is. Can you comment on our African experience in Senegal, testing for less than $1 while we are spending over $20, and Madagascar COVID homemade drink for treating the virus?
Yeah, I honestly, I think that is a very, very important point. And I know that earlier during our discussion, I gave an example of Singapore and India, and yet there is an African country next door like Rwanda and Senegal that we can learn from. And it has a lot to do with leadership. I mean, remember, I think Ghana, but even Nigeria to a certain extent, right? Remember before, and I remember when I was, before I would take all of this raw powder of some salt anytime I visit. And of course, I get to the immigration, they can carry all my yam and suya, and I'm really vexing into the state. Now we've got nicely packed pandoyam, acha, things like that that are really well processed. And we're getting there. But the example with Senegal is an incredible one where really they have put in such leadership that they have depended on homegrown efforts and elements to really put those tests together that would now be produced within the country. They don't have to compete with anybody, and is available to their population, and of course at a very subsidized rate, because there's a lot of investment from government that has gone into it. So yeah, no, that's a great example. And we need to get our act together, and I'm sure if we do, that's something that is very possible for Nigeria. Nigeria has shown that with agriculture, with chicken, with with the mask, given the right environment and given the right seed funds, like you were saying early, Pastor,
Yeah.
about investing. That is doable. That is what has happened in Senegal, and it's making a difference. They're even showing South Africa how to do things.
Wow, that's really really amazing. Well, we will get there. I believe so.
Yeah.
I'm
Amen.
sure that what we're experiencing in Nigeria is also showing us where we lack expertise, and especially where we lack in governance
Mm.
uh, and in leadership as well. And I believe that going forward, I mean, it's become very glaring that our health sector, I mean, we really didn't even have anything that was that efficient. And so now that we see that, I believe that COVID-19 is a catalyst that would help us do the right thing, revisit our policies all over again, and see that the necessary infrastructure for both, treatment and for research is put in place. I would
Oh,
like
yeah.
to bring Dr. Fati, up, and then I'll ask a question. So, Dr. Fatima Cheshi, good to have you on this broadcast. I'm sure you've been following our conversation.
Yes, sir. It's good to be here too. Wonderful conversation so far.
Amazing. Now, I'm going to throw this question to Prof. So, you work with viruses. Doesn't that put you at risk? I mean, health-wise, because you're in the laboratories. How do you mitigate the risks? Because quite clearly you're a health worker. And you've been doing this for years. So, how have you been able to, mitigate the risks?
Yes. No, that's a really good question. Sometimes, when I talk to colleagues, I try to point out the fact that I am not I am not fearful, but I respect the virus. In everything that I do, in every work that I do, I make sure that I'm not complicit. So, in some respects, honestly, I think my mother probably suffered more from my working in the laboratory than I did, because I knew what I was dealing with, right? Kind of. And I never, one thing that I've done in the lab is never take for granted all of the protective mechanism. I've never ever gotten familiar with any virus, no matter how many years I've worked with. My protective gear, I really have to wear it on all the time. I have to use what we call good laboratory practices all the time. When I'm too tired to think straight, because sometimes you're wearing all of that suit, you're in a negatively pressured lab, which really, you kind of communicate with the outside through certain things. When I'm really tired, I take the break. So there is a checklist in terms of what do you do? And I never take that for granted. For me, that was my reference point. And whether I worked with a virus for one day or bacteria for one day, or whether I've worked with it for the last 30 years, I respect. We all keep our own boundaries. It respects me, and I respect it. There's no mingling.
We saw, and I'm sure Dr. Fati, I mean, she's a frontline health worker, and there was this video that went viral, and it was one of those who handled the bodies of the late Abakari, who was removing his PPE suit, and he kind of just pulled it off without any protocol and dumped it somewhere. Later he would come back and throw it in a bag, and everyone was screaming and saying, look, this is coronavirus ready to get into the suburbs. I mean, that was truly careless. And it's good to hear Prof say, so there's a protocol, so to speak, to how those things should be put on and how it should be removed as well. Prof, maybe you'd, just
No,
one last
absolutely.
comment and then
Yeah, no, absolutely. there are, even the way you remove the gloves, there are ways you remove gloves, like when you work. That's why when people are talking about, and I've done a TV an interview where they ask me, "What about masks?" I say, "Yes, absolutely mask." But when you wear a mask, please don't go and touch this mask every single time, because it defeats the purpose. I know that it's just natural. So sometimes, gloves, I don't wear it because it gives me a false, like when I'm outside, right? People are wearing gloves because they touch this. I would rather use my hand, wash my hands, use sanitizer, because gloves give me a false sense of protection, right? And I never know when I take that contaminated glove and touch some place about it. And it's the same thing with the mask. The mask is supposed, somebody just coughed and that mask trapped everything so that you don't get infected, and then you're there pushing the mask with your hands. So it's all of those things that is why there is a procedure, and you really follow the procedure until it becomes part of you. I know it's very difficult, but this is why we've got to train ourselves over and over again and think about what we're doing, because it's all very strange to us. But certainly in the laboratory, the way you take out your gloves, the way you take out your gown, the way you wash your hands, and the way you handle the door before you step outside, it's all a routine. And I remembered growing, every single time we had that checklist in front of us, and you have to stand there. My professor that trained me 50 years is still standing in front of that and saying, okay, I've done this, next I do this. And really, that's the best way to keep ourselves safe during this time.
Thank you so much, Professor Alashley Abimiku. Would need to let you go. Thank you for the contributions that you have made. There's just so many comments out there, commending, this conversation. Here's one. Thanks, Pastor Shola and Prof as well for, very insightful conversation. And let me see. They're just great broadcast, helpful information.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Health is wealth. Proper feeding is in itself a way of fighting. Really nice. Really, 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 really nice to see that people are just appreciating everything that has been done. I wish I could take more, but I think we'll need to let you go, ma'am. So thank you so much, Prof. And
Thank you so much, Pastor. It's really a pleasure and a privilege to be part of your panel. Like I said, I've been fed over and over and over again in Lighthouse, and it's just such a pleasure to give back a tiny, tiny, tiny little bit. And I've really enjoyed the evening. Thanks very much.
Thank you. And it'll be
to my sister now.
It'll be a pleasure to also have you back. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. God bless you as well. Bye-bye.
So this conversation continues with Dr. Fatima Cheshi, and she is a healthcare worker at the front line of COVID-19. So day after day, she is one expert that is seeing what is happening. Now, Dr. Fatima, here is what I want to put across. The description of warfare has changed. So years back, when you thought about war, you literally were speaking about getting soldiers to go fight, some enemy out there. The enemy today is a microscopic organism that is known as COVID-19. So we've got a new definition of warfare. And by virtue of that, we have new frontline actors. And people like you, we must commend you for all the effort that you're making, and many others as well. Doctors, nurses, lab technicians. Now, you are significantly and at risk individual. Recently, we heard that over 40 doctors, and I know that number jumped to 45, have contacted the COVID-19 virus. Now, how does that make you feel, knowing that you're going into some kind of battle? And I don't know how prepared you were for this. A few months ago, nobody knew that there was going to be this pandemic. But how does that make you feel, having to be at the front line? And I know that you're helping people, but you're also at risk.
Thank you, Pastor, for having me on. I'll be speaking on behalf of thousands of health workers out there who have risked their lives and made sacrifices really between the devil and the deep blue sea to see that people get out of all of this, and get out of really critical conditions in the health facilities. How the health worker feels can only be imagined, from the way the person thinks in the head. There are psychological challenges that these health workers are faced with. On a daily basis, and aware of the virulent organism that you're fighting, the effectiveness of COVID-19, and every day you're faced with caring for these patients that are infected, and the fact that it runs through your head that I could be the very next person who is infected, because you are giving care to these people. The fact that you are a possible source of this infection to your family members, because you won't sleep in the hospital the entire day. You would have to go home at some point. The fact that you also do have the challenges of perhaps transportation. Some health workers do not have their own vehicles and would have to go into public vehicles to get to their workplaces, even in the face of COVID-19. So the fact that I could be infecting more people, or more people, I am exposing myself. So when you talk about lockdown, it doesn't quite make sense to the health worker, because you are working anyway. There's no lockdown in the context of the health worker. There are many issues that the health worker is really faced with, beyond the psychological challenges, even financial issues, because there's been discussions around hazard allowance for those who have risked their lives. There's been issues about improvement of the insurance packages for the health worker. So these are all the kind of things that the health worker is faced with.
The possibility of working long hours. So we've looked at exposure, the psychological distress as well. And, especially with families. So you can imagine raising children who know that you're a frontline worker. Every day you're out there and you're exposed to this virus. And I try to imagine what it's like coming home and what children are going to be saying to the health worker. Are they going to be eager to hug? Because does social distancing extend also to the home? These are part of the challenges. And, for me, the health worker truly needs to be celebrated, truly needs to be compensated. And I don't know how much is being done, but we know that a couple of conversations are ongoing in the country with respect to, compensating them adequately. The other thing as well, which comes up, is that even some of the patients themselves are not helpful. So you find people lying about their condition. And we've seen a lot of that happen, where a patient comes in and lies, he's been out of the country and lies about it, and eventually goes into a regular hospital. And at the end of the day, they're treating a patient who they feel has maybe typhoid fever, only to realize that the person, was carrying the COVID virus. I mean, for a job that really, I think doctors are like teachers who they sometimes say their reward is in heaven. How do you feel and your colleagues, because you're representing a constituency, an at risk constituency? How do you feel to that?
Okay, well, since the COVID-19 pandemic began, I'll be contextual now in Nigeria. Initially, um, the average health worker probably would have just, seen a patient coming in with fever and assumed by default this is probably malaria, and may want to treat malaria. But awareness has increased, especially amongst health workers. There's been training of frontline health workers across the states. Currently, we do have about 34 of the states being affected. We have cases across 34 states. So you have health workers across all the 36 plus FCT who have been trained to identify COVID-19 cases. The first rule is to make sure that you have a high index of suspicion. What does that mean? That means that, in fact, every person you see is a COVID-19 positive patient until proven otherwise. So you are working with that caution that for every one person who crosses your door to your health facility, regardless of the symptoms that that patient comes in with, you suspect the person and you avail the person with the caution and also testing for COVID-19. So
Right.
that's a general rule that has guided health
Okay.
workers.
So caution all the way. And like Prof said earlier, you must respect the virus. And it's part
Absolutely.
of the caution. Now,
Mm-hmm.
lately, and I'll take you to some lately, Kanu has been in the limelight.
Mm-hmm.
On Twitter, someone said, and was kind of like using football to say, suddenly from nowhere, Kanu wants to finish top 3 in the league. Now, as hilarious as that may seem, Kanu seemed to have come from nowhere. We've heard about the deaths that are taking place in Kanu. No autopsies were conducted. So it kind of is speculative. Lately, the numbers have gone up. Now, when you look at what's happening everywhere else, the words are testing, testing, testing. That we've got to keep testing and testing and testing. As at yesterday, Nigeria is about 11,000 people tested. Ghana is, close to 100,000. Now, doesn't it mean that we still have not scratched, the issue of really dealing with, the COVID-19 virus?
Well, I would say we haven't done as we should as a country, and that's because I think we began to address this COVID-19 pandemic with some levity as a country. We took it lightly and assumed that because we were able to fight Ebola, as a country, we'll be able to fight COVID. Unfortunately, COVID has come up to be an identity of its own. It's very different from Ebola. Having said that, the government is doing its best, could do better. Testing initially was based on a particular case definition, which meant that you needed to meet a particular criteria to be tested. And that case definition was centered around the known symptoms of COVID-19. And also, if you had travel history. Now, after the borders closed, that case definition didn't quite hold any longer because with the closures of the borders, those that were already infected had come into in country and had related with others who were prior to that time negative. Those have become positive, and then now we're having community transmission, which is a bigger problem. Now discussions are on to redefine the case definition to align with our realities right now. We will no longer have to wait for you to show symptoms before you are being tested. So for example, there are considerations of testing every pregnant woman that comes into a facility for antenatal, for example, because we've seen evidences in the US and in the UK that women will come in for delivery who were probably not manifesting any of the symptoms that look like COVID, but post-delivery, then they begin to manifest some kind of symptoms, and when tested, they turn positive. So the country is redefining the case definition for COVID and criteria for testing. And that's why you hear of the strategy of going house to house in Lagos and in Abuja. Lagos had been the epicenter, which is where most of the cases we've been finding. The highest number of cases are in Lagos. So the house-to-house strategy is to begin to actively look for cases wherever they are. The other side of this is the fact that for us to be able to test over 200 million people, that's a lot. So even though it's a desire of the country to want to test the entire population, it will be financially not wise. The funds will have to be used judiciously across the entire need for the response, because just as testing is seeking some funding, treatment is seeking some funding. So to say the least, to test a COVID-19 patient all through from when he becomes positive and manifests the symptom and perhaps gets to critical states, the cost of treatment and management of one COVID-19 case is a lot. So there has to be that balance, and it has to be scientifically driven. So for a state that probably has 1, 2, 3, 4 cases, it would not be scientifically wise to want to test the entire state.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. Now, there has been, in public space, so people out of their fears are coming up with all kinds of remedies. Donald Trump said to us, or rather said publicly, that chloroquine would help fight, the virus. Now, again, Donald Trump has said that, and he was looking and saying that doctors should probably use, aerosols that are, have potential to kill viruses like Lysol and so on. And Nigerians, we have our own versions as well. I remember during the Ebola time. So one day we woke up and it was drinking salt, and all kinds of things. So whether it's salt, lemon, we've talked about building immunity, but just drinking, and people are out there actually merchandising all kinds of things. So what's your own, take on these things? What we've talked about eating healthy, but lemon and water, warm water in the morning, does it really do anything? Someone said when you take it, even if the virus has entered into your throat, hot water, lemon will wash it into your stomach and kill it. So, should we be doing these things really, or just be healthy and eat the things that help us to be healthy?
Okay, yes, as Nigerians, I think the drama around controversy theories seems to excite a lot of people who are Nigerians. But I would cautiously say at this point that keep it simple. Keep it simple means it's been proven that if you keep with washing of hands frequently, avoiding touching the face area with your hands, knowing how to sneeze if you have to sneeze within the angle of your arm, all of that might look like drama, but those are the things that will keep us safe. Of course, like Prof had said earlier, making sure that you maintain good diet and rest and exercise, okay, so that you are physically fit and then your body is able to fight the virus. And that's why someone will be a carrier and not come down with the critical illness, because the person's body is able to fight, the COVID-19 in his body, his or her body. So I would say that those things will always come. More will come, more will come because people want to merchandise all sorts of things. But scientifically speaking, what works are the things that we've been told. Social distancing, and by social distancing, of course, we do not mean that you do not interact socially, of course, but physical distancing, actually. That terminology has been redefined to be physical distancing of at least 2 meters between yourself and another person. And of course, if you keep with the lockdown, rules as government has put it, I think you will keep safe.
Thank you. Now, what about the challenge to the health worker of inadequate equipment, PPEs? China literally is controlling nose masks. And I heard the Commissioner of Health in Lagos State, saying that they were encouraging local production so that the medical nose masks can be reserved for doctors because, here you are, frontline worker, and there are hundreds of you out there, possibly thousands actually, not having access to PPEs, nose masks can truly be discouraging. But yet you're expected to go out there and still fulfill your obligations. I mean, I almost feel like saying, I thank God I'm not a doctor. Now, and I said, I feel like saying, and that's why, I value what you're doing, because if everybody said that, then nobody would be out there. But to work in an environment where I need gloves and maybe it's not adequate, and I need a nose mask, and I'm still expected to perform, can truly be frustrating. So are you aware, is the government doing anything to alleviate these challenges? Are we seeing, positive signs and encouraging things going on?
Yes. For the personal protective equipment, there's been a global shortage actually of personal protective equipment, which is why innovations in country like, handmade nose masks make sense. However, while we do that, we need to be careful about the standards and what will really be protective, because you could make something that looks like it's protecting you, but actually you are exposed to the entire thing that is in the air. So I would say that government is trying its best. Funds have been donors, organizations and international organizations have been supporting government. Government itself has set out, particular budgets to be able to procure personal protective equipment for health workers, especially in the isolation and treatment centers, that have been designated across the country. However, there's still a shortage of those PPEs, because the day you order is not the day you get it. And because it's not only Nigeria that is having to place these orders, other countries are grappling for the same source of this personal protective equipment. So what government has now directed, the protocol says that there should be rational use of this personal protective equipment. What does that mean? You could have healthcare worker, and the healthcare worker should be able to use it across, the work while on that shift, such that you only get to change it on your next shift. So those are the kind of rational use of personal protective equipment. Then for the general population, the advice is to do everything possible. I mean, you could use the handkerchief to create a nose mask for yourself. You know, you don't have to make it look like a designer thing. As long as your nose is protected, I think you're good.
Thank you. Now, here's a question from Emmanuel Ifeanyiwandulu. He said, I saw on CNN today a man offering free gas to health workers from his $900 savings at a gas station in the US. How can Nigerians support their frontline workers? I mean, this is a good question, because what we really need to know, one of the reasons why sometimes people don't respond is because they really don't know what can be done. And so here's a question: what suggestions would you? Because there are lots of people watching right now. It remains online, for quite a bit. So other people who are not joined in live will still watch this broadcast. So what do you think Nigerians should do to encourage, our frontline health workers?
Okay, I'll start from the top. As you may be aware, there's a presidential task force on the COVID-19 response, and various individuals, organizations, corporate entities have in one way or the other contributed their own bit to supporting the government of Nigeria through that platform of the presidential task force. That's on a higher note, on the large scale support. But on the day-to-day support that you can do for a healthcare worker, a call to that healthcare worker to say, how are you? How did your day go? How are your patients doing? How is your family doing? Will go a long way. Evidence has shown so far that one of the challenges and the effects of COVID-19 pandemic on healthcare workers is psychological breakdown, mental issues. Okay, people are going into depression because of the kind of things that they go through within that I had earlier spoken about. So a call to show you care will go a long way. I had said earlier, one of the challenges is that some healthcare workers don't even have vehicles to go to work of their own and may have to go with public transport. That further exposes them. You never can tell who the driver is and the status of the driver. So if you could provide a vehicle to help that healthcare worker move from his or her house to his place of work and back, that will go a long way. And then perhaps if you're a neighbor to a healthcare worker, you could offer to say, I'll do your lunch for you. You could offer to say, I will support your family in your absence. I mean, while maintaining the physical and social distancing. I think that will go a long way.
Thank
while
you,
government,
sir.
of course, is dealing with the issue of making sure that there's the upgrading of their take-home pays with the hazard allowance that has been approved, hazard allowance and a package for insurance for all the healthcare workers, especially at the federal health facility. Yeah.
Okay. So
and then some states are coming up with packages that are unique to themselves.
Okay. So if for example, like I have access to, let's say, 5,000 nose masks, what can I do with that? Can I buy it? And if I do, who do I take it to? What organization? Is it the Presidential Task Force, or is it the NCDC? Or do I walk into a local hospital and say, look, I'm just making my own contributions?
Okay, depending on what level you want to intervene, really, there are different levels of intervention. You could go to the Presidential Task Force. They are open to receive all donations related to COVID-19 response. That would be the proper thing to do if you're dealing with government, okay? But then again, if you have a health facility that is close to you and you think you want to impact, in this season positively, yes, you could give to that health facility. It will go a long way to help in the shortage of face masks.
Okay. Well, let's take this question, and this is probably going to be our last question for tonight. This is from Ruth Adams. How reliable is the test provided in Nigeria, and how was it acquired, as other countries have experienced test kits that failed the quality test? Huge question here. How reliable is it, or are we just taking potluck, whatever we have available, we've got to work with?
Okay, so I will speak from the point of the information that I have. We have test kits in country that have been certified by WHO. WHO is the organization that is responsible to ensure that whatever comes in, especially with regards to health, drugs, and equipment, and they set the standards really. So with the test kits, WHO certification had taken place. So those test kits, as they come, will be tested using a proven with positive case sample to be sure that the result is given is reliable. So as far as reliability is concerned, if the test is done within the context of the facilities that have been identified as testing centers, then it's reliable. But then again, that you could have other places, private practitioners who will tell you they have the test kits and they can test. That I cannot verify, that I can't vouch for. Okay. But as long as you go to a testing center, it is certified.
Certified. All right. So we heard that many countries rejected PPEs from China as they were found to be defective. Did Nigeria reject any?
Not that I am aware of.
I know you're not speaking on behalf of government, but okay. So
I'm not aware that we rejected any.
Okay, maybe this should have also come to Prof. Why are we not exploring herbal, antiviral, and anti-inflammatory products like Madagascar? There's no record of a single death there. That's...
Interestingly, COVID-19 is one very interesting virus that nobody in the world, when I say nobody, every country is grappling with wanting to understand this virus. So nobody can categorically tell you I've found a solution to it. However, you cannot discount that people have tried some things and it worked for them. What's essential is if anything you do that improves your immunity will surely protect you from going down with COVID-19. That's the general rule. So whatever you do that maintains good health condition in the absence of comorbidities I mean will be other illnesses like hypertension, diabetes, and you keep to the good dieting and you're able to build your immunity, you're sure to be able to fight COVID-19. That has been proven. So I wouldn't discount what's happening in Madagascar, but then again, you can't take that and project across other countries.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Fati, thank you so much. Truly, and I speak on behalf of numerous Nigerians, we truly want to commend and salute every health worker out there at the front line, doing their best. And we know that in challenging circumstances and in probably difficult, environments, but still pushing to ensure that they save the lives of as many Nigerians as possible. And we must be thankful that the deaths recorded so far still very low, as much as we sympathize with the families that have lost, loved ones in, the coronavirus battle. But we must salute every health worker there. And to everyone out there, please, if you know a health worker and anyone who's at the front line, please encourage them, strengthen them. We've heard that, look, they're prone to depression and psychological maladies or whatever you may want to call them. And we should do our best to support and encourage them. A phone call, And for those of you who have resources out there, you can buy whatever is required and just make donations. And we believe that this collective fight will be one in which we will be victorious. And we're trusting God Almighty while we do what we need to do. We must trust God that these will come to an end in the shortest possible time. So, Dr. Fatima Cheshi, thank you so much. Keep doing the good work you're doing, and God Almighty will protect you, your entire family.
Thank you.
And you represent every health worker out there, and every health worker as well. The Lord will protect you and keep you safe right through all of this. Thank you for coming on this broadcast. God bless you.
Thank you so much. May I also say that on behalf of every health worker, doctors, nurses, pharmacists, lab technicians, the drivers of the ambulances, the security men at the facilities, we want to thank you so much for thinking about us and bringing us to center stage and appreciating the work that we do. God bless you,
God.
sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, this has been an exciting evening understanding COVID-19 and the challenges of the health worker. And I believe that it has been very illuminating for you. The beauty of this broadcast is that it remains on our platforms, Facebook and YouTube, and you can get your friends, tag them, and get them to, just engage and go listen to it and be greatly enlightened by the information that's out there. Now, this Friday, we are going to be having a very special time. And I need you to take note of this. We're going to be looking at the impact of media and entertainment in the COVID-19 world. And our special guest is Dr. Victor Oladokun, who was the past Director of Communications for the African Development Bank. So it's going to be Friday, 7 p.m. West African time. And I tell you, this is one broadcast you do not want to miss. And he also, was the anchor person and producer for the Christian Broadcasting Network program, one of the programs that many of us watched again and again and again, showcasing a lot of people within the kingdom and all that God had endowed them with. So look forward to this special event, and I believe that you will join us on Friday, 1st of May 2020 at 7 p.m. West African time. It's always a pleasure to bring this broadcast to you, these conversations, and I'm glad you were able to join us. And I'm thankful for the things that you've been able to learn. We must thank God for Prof. Alashley Abimiku, and for Dr. Fatima Cheshi for taking time out to be with us today. So I look forward to seeing you again Friday, 7 p.m. with Dr. Victor Oladokun. From my heart to you, it is Shola Adesoye, pastor of the Lighthouse Ministries International and Lighthouse Churches. It's been a wonderful evening. God bless you. Look forward to seeing you again on Friday.
The COVID-19 pandemic is real.
However, you can prevent its spread through these measures.
Wash your hands often with soap and running water for at least 20 seconds, or use an alcohol-based hand sanitizer.
Cover your nose and mouth with disposable tissue or flexed elbow when you cough or sneeze.
Don't touch your eyes, nose, and mouth with unwashed or unclean hands.
Maintain a distance of at least 1 meter or 3 feet from people.
Stay at home, and if you feel unwell, self-isolate.
Remember, safety begins with you. Stay safe.
If we all observe the basic rules of engagement and stay at home, the virus will not spread. I am committed to stopping the spread of COVID-19. I am Lighthouse.